Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Sanders. I'm Head of Accreditation for the CICMQ program. And welcome to the 90th, yes, ladies and gentlemen, the 90th Zoom call that we've done since lockdown. So we've had over 1,700 people on the various calls that we've done, probably 1,750 now. So we're on our 90th call. I was hoping to get to 100 by the anniversary, which is next month, but we are slowly approaching 100 of these calls. So it's been quite a remarkable time for everybody, I think, but certainly for us in what we're doing. Today we're going to be talking about the COVID-19, which is the Credit Manager's Playbook edition number 5, which is going to be on the Institute's website very shortly, and it is essentially the 19 things that credit managers should think about over the next over this year. And it's something that I've written, and it's pulling information from lots of the different sources and things that the people that we speak to as to what other organisations have been doing, and it's quite an interesting. So if you get one or two things out of this list, then it's probably been worthwhile. So there is pretty much something for everyone, I think, on this. But first of all, what I would like to do is to do a quick poll. Okay, a quick poll on where we are and what you think we are currently. So I'm just going to start the poll. So we've got the first poll. Poll number 1 is about the new normal, and there are a couple of questions in here, and I would just like you to answer those questions. I'm launching the poll now, so you should be able to see it on there. If you could just answer the questions, there are, I believe, 3 of them. If you could answer those, that would be terrific, and then we'll go back to the actual session itself. So the first question: after 1 year, do you think we've now arrived at the new normal that everyone has been speaking about? I think they were speaking about it from May last year, actually, I think. Has your organisation made the decision about future working in your business? Yes, not yet. They're still thinking about it. Whether they have or not, what do you want it to be? Work from home 100%? Work from the office 100%? Hybrid workplace? Office only for team meetings, etc.? So let's just sort of hold on while everybody answers those questions. Okay, right. I'm going to. You got 91% have voted, 93% have voted, 44 or 47, 95% have voted, 45 or 47. There's a couple of people that haven't. I'm one of them, so it doesn't count. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now on that one, and let's have a quick look at what we've got. So yes, after 1 year, we've now arrived at the new normal. So 20% said that. No, we haven't. 20% have said that. 58% saying not yet. We haven't yet. So it's 58%. That's interesting. And don't know, 2%. So that's one person doesn't know yet, and that's probably I'm not surprised at that. Has your organisation made the decision about future working? 18% said 100% yes, they have. 27% no, not yet, and 56% are saying they're still looking into it. And then finally, do you want? That's interesting, isn't it? Nobody wants to go back to the office at 100%. Unsurprising. So work from home is 16%. Answer 0 for nobody, for 80% a hybrid workplace, and working for one-to-ones and team meetings only 4%. So that's where we are. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks very much indeed for that. I'm going to stop sharing the poll now. I'm just going to quickly share those results, so you should see. Has everybody seen those? If you can give me a thumbs up if you've seen the sharing from it. Okay, great. Let's stop sharing. Right, let's go back out of that then. Okay, so I'm now going to share my screen, and we're going to start the presentation. Okay, here we go. Right, again, if you can see that, just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, some of you know the form on this thing, so that's great. Okay. Good stuff. So the Credit Manager's Playbook. Many of you, most people, I think, probably know who I am. I run the CICMQ program for the Institute, I also am an independent consultant as well. And I work for a company called Kinetic Consulting, which is the international stuff that we do. It's what's called a portfolio career, which basically means I get bored very quickly. So I have to keep moving around and doing different things. And this year for me, it's been brilliant. I've absolutely loved 2020. And what we're going to talk about here are the 19 things to think about. Now, some of these things you may already do, some of them you may not do, but it'd be interesting at the end, we can have another poll to sort of find out what do you think are the most important things that's come up out of these sessions as we go through. Okay, so I tapped into Google word cloud pandemic, and I got these amongst about 150 others. But these kind of sum up really what's been happening. The homeschooling thing, the amount of stuff that's been scammed, there's been lots of scamming going on. Business and home working and mental health. These are the sorts of things that have jumped out at me when we're looking at this, and it's interesting. Where we are now has definitely changed forever, and the results of that poll have certainly showed that. We know. We were moving towards megacities. You know, there were large groups of people that were moving from outlying areas into major cities, and as a result of that, the countryside was reducing, and cities were just getting larger and larger. So where are we now? With everything with the mega cities the way that they are, they're sort of hotbeds and breeding grounds for the pandemic. So people are moving out, and house prices certainly in the UK and some of the outlying villages, etc., from London have been going up, which is a good thing if you've got a house there. The other things. I think we're definitely beginning to see the light. My jab, for example, I'm getting poked, as they say, tomorrow. My wife had it yesterday, but it's interesting that the group that I'm in, which is the sort of the 55 to 65-year-olds, is one of the largest groups for the vaccine, and that's something that ties in to one of the comments that we're saying a little bit later on today about the size of the workforce that we've got currently and where we are. So city centre decline is brought forward things like the retail decline as well, where everybody's sort of using Amazon, although other online shops are available. But it is certainly changing the way in which we interact with work colleagues, with the cities, transport, and everything that we've been doing is very different. I changed the insurance on my car the other day, and it halved the price by saying I'm going to just do probably 3,000 to 5,000 miles this year, right? So if you haven't renewed your insurance on your car, do it now, because you're going to save quite a lot of money. The other problem is it's just still sitting in the driveway. It hasn't really moved for the last few months. So Zoom has been our communication method of choice. And I was speaking to a client yesterday, and they're saying that they've actually had more interaction with other parts of the business than they've ever had before, for the other divisions and departments and people that they've met, and the other parts of the team that they don't normally meet before. So the 19 things, let's have a quick start with this. Number one, now this is not, these are not in any particular order. It's a bit of a brain dump, but this one has got to be in one of the top 3 things. Visibility. The visibility of us as credit managers has been significant, and Simon Howell and a number of other credit managers on the call will know that we were very, very popular in April, May last year as credit professionals, especially operational credit professionals, and staying visible has proved to be a challenge for many people. The one thing that we would say is, if you're going into the office, and we are talking about hybrid workplaces as what we believe is going to happen, if you're going to the office, don't sit at the email and do your email at your hot desk, because that's a waste of time. You can do that when you're working from home. If you're in the office, you should be out there trying to meet people, trying to stay visible in the organization. If you've got a plan, or you haven't got a plan for stakeholder management, you should start thinking about creating one. You know, who are the key stakeholders that you need to chase down? Who do you need to talk to on a regular basis, etc., etc. It's really important that you do that now more than ever before. We know that people are only ever interested in cash when it started to run out. Well, now it's pretty stable. Things are pretty stable in most organizations. So what are we doing now to maintain that place at the table? for stakeholder management. That's something that we should all be doing. I think that's probably in the top 5 things that I think that we should do. Well-being, yeah. Flexible working. We've spoken about flexible working. 56% of organizations are looking at it at the moment, and 58% don't know what the new normal is yet, but a hybrid workplace, 80%. I mean, that's kind of where we all want to be. And these are 2 quotes from 2 organizations. Siemens, that one came out back in July, I think it was, last year, where they said you can work from wherever you feel comfortable. Now, the interesting thing about that was this is an old, what you would call an old-fashioned organization. This is a big, chunky manufacturing business with big factories everywhere. It's not what you would call a digital organization like Facebook or something like that, but they came out first. It's a new CEO, and he came out first with that. Work from wherever you feel comfortable. So, as I've said before, it could be a beanbag in Starbucks, it could be a bedroom, it could be sitting on the loo. It's up to you where you want to work, and that's what they've said. And you can work from wherever you feel comfortable. If you look at Spotify, they came out with something yesterday, and they said they're going to let employees keep working remotely, and you can choose what country you want to work from. Obviously, there are some tax implications, but you can choose from wherever you want to work, but on the same benefits that you're currently on. So me, I'd like to work on, I'd like to keep what I'm being paid now and go and live in Goa, right? Because it's pretty cheap over there, right? Or as some people have done, these where they've migrated to Barbados, and they've got these sort of vacation type, working from home in vacation type things. So that's an interesting one. Let's keep working remotely and now choose the country that you want to work from. Another thing that's interesting about that is that we've talked about 2 or 3 days of working from the office, but HSBC, they said this week that they're going to be closing 50% of their offices, but they're keeping Canary Wharf. They wanted to keep Canary Wharf because it was their flagship building. Now that's a boost to Canary Wharf, and it makes you wonder, well, if they're keeping Canary Wharf, and theirs is a big building in Canary Wharf, as you know, they must be getting some grants or something like that to enable them to do that, because it's a very expensive building. How important is it that they keep it? And they're talking about keeping it for the local economy, etc., etc. But it's an interesting one. So we'll see what happens with the decreasing working population. Remaining flexible is going to have to be something that we're going to have to do. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the largest vaccination groups, the 55 to 65-year-olds, which is the one that I'm in, and they're the baby boomers, 1947 to 1964, and so a lot of those guys are retiring now. Right. So if we don't become more flexible, then we're going to have, there's less people in the workforce. So it's interesting that we need to be more flexible and stay there. But what's also interesting is that why are so many organizations dragging their feet? Why are they not coming up with the certainty of what they're going to do? If we remain uncertain about what we're doing, then people will leave. And we know that the people that will leave will be the smart ones and the ones that we want to keep. The ones that, so we need to think, organizations need to think about it. When we've got a list here, and this is one of the reasons why I asked this question, has your organization made a decision? They're still looking into it. 56% of them are still looking into it. And you have to think, why? Come on. Let's make a decision, guys. Let's give some certainty to people. People don't want uncertainty. So it's something that's an interesting one, that one. My favorite quote from last year was, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And the COVID-19 was certainly the proverbial punch in the face for most people. Contingency planning used to be the preserve of the contingency planning managers, right? And you have to think back to March last year. How good were the contingency plans of organizations? Most of them resulted in you moving offices from one place to another. They didn't involve you picking up everything and going to live and work in your bedroom, right? So how good were those contingency plans? But contingency plans are now the responsibility of every operational manager. It's not just the contingency planning manager or the disaster recovery manager, they used to call them. So resilience is something that we have to do. Now, what does resilience mean? And there's lots of different meanings. I'm doing a session for an organization soon, which it'll be announced on LinkedIn quite soon, a resilience workshop. And resilience is defined as the ability to absorb, respond, and adapt, as well as recover from a disruptive event. That's what resilience means. If you look at individual resilience or personal resilience, that is a psychological quality that allows some people to be knocked down by the adversities of life and come back at least as strong as before. So that's an interesting one. So apply those to your business. And it talks about resilient structure, system, community, or organization is expected to be able to resist an extreme event. And let's face it, COVID was pretty extreme, with minimal damage and functionality disruptions during the event. After the event, it should be able to rapidly recover its functionality and operations, similar to or even better than the pre-event. So that's the resilience. So that's an interesting one. So what do we need to do to plan for resilience? Look at our documentation. I was speaking to a client about this the other day. Don't try and document everything. Just document starting with the top 5 things. Don't try and do everything first. Simplification and predictability. If it's simple and predictable, you know what the outcome is, you can probably automate it. So put together a team of people that are going to drive that within your team and start thinking about how you can make yourselves more resilient. Talking of simplification, simplify your KPIs now is something that you might want to think about. A common cause is lost in complexity. And why do we love a common cause? A common cause is one of the 3 attributes of a high-performing team. And if you've got complex KPIs or complex service level agreements, you tend to lose that common cause very quickly. You end up trying to do everything and not actually achieving anything. So SLAs, service level agreements, lots of organizations have them. But if you've got service level agreements and there is no consequence, what's the point? A service level agreement is only good if there's a consequence for it. So if you don't do it, what happens? And it could be that the consequences doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get dragged outside and tarred and feathered. What it could mean is that it's going to be escalated to the management team, or there's going to be remedial action put in place or whatever. So don't have SLAs if there's no consequence. So that's one way of simplifying things. And KPIs is definitely less is more. When we did some work with Shell some years ago, we actually managed the whole of the Shell credit management function on 3 fundamental KPIs, and that was all, just 3. So that's about 1,200 people, 53 different countries, and we managed it on 3 KPIs. Yes, granted, there were some operational KPIs for speed of allocation of cash and things like that, but fundamentally there were 3 things that they looked at. So you need to make sure that you have those 3 things. So the objective, can you get it down to 3 things to actually manage your department? And when you're looking at KPIs, this is a personal favorite of mine and also Karen from Tarmac and Waitman's, league tables. Yeah, league tables. Nobody likes to be at the bottom of a league table. The possibilities for league tables are endless. They always work. And if you doubt that, please watch the Waitman's YouTube video or the Tarmac YouTube video. And they, as I said, they always work, and the possibilities for these are endless. You can look at league tables on the basis of percentage queries, debt, error rates on new application forms, by division, by sales. If you're in a professional service firm like Peter is, yeah, fee earners, departments, and Alan as well from Menzies, all of these sorts of things that are easily done to look at it. Now, yes, as I said, the possibilities are endless, but you do have to be a bit brave. You can't just sort of start these things and then sort of do the nuclear option and publish them immediately. You have to start, you have to ease them in, and you have to work with your stakeholders to make it happen. But don't forget, nobody likes to be at the bottom of a league table, and they do change behavior. Number 6, nurture a high-performing culture and team. All right. We've seen some amazing high-performing cultures and teams during lockdown, and the way that organizations have pulled together. And we'll talk a bit more about people strategy soon. But a common cause, we've mentioned a common cause. How do we actually get the whole team working towards one thing? And the other thing we need to think about is the management of stakeholders, and we've spoken about that as well. There was a great quote that came out of the Waitman's presentation, actually, a couple of weeks back. This was from I think it was Bob, I think, that said it, Pete. He said that if you're lucky enough to be someone's manager, you have a moral obligation to make them look forward to coming to work. Right now, that is how to nurture a high-performing team. People want to come to work. Now, clearly, they want to come to work, but they don't want to go to the office, which is what you've said. But you've got a moral obligation to make people to make people want to come to work. And given that work is such an important part of our lives, it is very important. As managers and professionals, we impact people's lives. So we need to make sure that we're treating people right. And if you've got a good performance culture, you've got a people strategy, you've got a plan and a common cause, and you manage your stakeholders, that's what creates a common cause and nurturing a high-performing team. Learning and sharing. Sharing doubles the knowledge. The CICMQ Best Practice Network, which many of you are members of, and it's really great that you're on today. There is so much stuff out there now that there's no reason why you can't say, oh, I don't have time. There is an opportunity for learning at any time of the day or night. We've got the 20+ CICMQ Zoom calls that we've had for some time now. We have the playbooks. We've got there's industry groups, there's webinars, there's best practice cross-industry sharing of best practice. So there's all sorts of stuff online. Everything that we do now, morning Lou, everything that we do now is all about content. Yeah, unique content is what organizations are looking to deliver. So their sales strategies are changing, not just from face-to-face meetings, which are obviously changing very much now, but they're talking about content. How do we demonstrate that we know what we're talking about? We put unique content out there. And that's what we've been focusing on for the CICMQ team. There's an awful lot now of unique content on the web. And I'm very pleased that myself and the team have been able to get quite a lot of stuff out there, which is really good. So there's an awful lot out there, and when I send the links around from the various calls, there's links to the various boards and things that you can go to and have a look at. And again, we'll be sending that out later on. So sharing does double the knowledge. When you're sharing also, don't just assume that you don't just join things like, there's lots of industry forums out there for just one particular industry. Yeah, so the building products or whatever. But there's lots of other ones out there which are general ones. Now, best practice, cross-industry best practice is something that's great. League tables, for example, I introduced in telcos. I then introduced those same league tables into the energy sector. I then introduced those same league tables and billing accuracy into the energy sector. We already had them in telco. So there's great stuff out there, and you can share best practice from industry to industry. Just because it's a building products one doesn't necessarily mean it's got everything that you need to know in there. So there's lots of opportunity to share different ones. Knowing your customer. There's a couple of things on this one. First of all, understanding liquidity is a killer, right? Which ones are can't pay, won't pay. So it's important that you understand which ones are which. And there is in the playbook, there is the matrix of can't pay, won't pay, and like a sort of a strategy document in there, which I think you can do. And it's going to be in the actual playbook document itself, which will be launched shortly. Customers' payment processes. We spoke about, we've been involved a lot lately, Sharon, myself and Pam, with the accounts payable guys. And we found it's been really interesting for us because, we're dyed-in-the-wool AR people. We never really looked across the other side, to the dark side of AP. But I really recommend that you do. And one of the easiest and straight away thing you can do is go and talk to your AP team. Find out what are the things that stress them out. What's their problem? What causes their issues? And there are 3 things that struck me when talking to the AP guys, was that they do, like us, we have a cash target, so do they. Their cash target is all about retaining it rather than giving it away, right? So they have a thing called a quota. And if you're in that quota, you're going to get paid. If you're not, you won't. Right, so think about that. What is the quota? Find out what the quotas are and where you sit in those quotas. But obviously, the more important you are in their supply chain, the higher up the quota you're going to be. So how do you push yourself up the quota? The other thing is fraud, right? Organizations that send in invoices into other businesses in the hope that they're just going to pay it and not look. Right. So sometimes it's about finding that ceiling level of where stuff needs to be approved. So think about that. What fraud do your teams have? And the other thing is copy invoices. Most AP organizations that have good processes don't like copy invoices because they lead to duplicate payments. And that's something else. So you may sort of say, all right, I'll tell you what, we'll send another copy invoice with this statement or another copy invoice with this letter or this email. And they probably won't thank you for it. So you need to think about that. So have a chat with your AP group. We're going to be doing some joint AP and AR sessions in the coming months. And I recommend you join them. We've already had one. We already had the chief executive of the Accounts Payable Association on, and that, again, that's been recorded. That's on YouTube. That's a chap called Jamie Radford, and he's a really good guy, and he talks about the pressures that they've had. So it's worth looking at that. Where are we? Okay, so so when you're looking at customers and getting to know your customers, do the welcome calls, find out what they are, and who is responsible for signing stuff off. Think about your industry, think about your customers and your customers' customers. Which are the ones that are being impacted now? What are the locations are they in? Is it changed because of the location that they're in, with the tiers and stuff like that we've seen coming through? Are there going to be tiers again? Probably. Yeah, we don't know yet. So have a think about that. High volumes of queries and disputes, are those things normal? So just think about all of these things and know your customer. But one of the first things, as I said, important that you could do is to figure out how you're going to get paid. In other words, what the process is for being paid. And the other thing is also try and talk to your AP team. It's always worth doing that. So number 9, review your vendors. And if you are vendors on here, I apologize unreservedly for this, but you should absolutely review your vendors. Don't forget, your vendors have been through just as a traumatic time as you have. They've had to adjust their processes. They've had to adjust their practices. They've had to suddenly up sticks and start working from home as well. Has it impacted them? Yeah. How good are they? How resilient are they now? Do they still fit what they do? Does it still fit with what you do? Yeah. So how has it impacted your vendors? Have you spoken to your vendors and asked them, so, okay, guys, so what have you been doing and how's it working now? Don't forget, these guys like to be seen as the extension of your credit team, right? So make sure that they are still really fit for purpose. I know there's a couple of vendors on here, and as I say, you know, and the ones that I can see that are on here, I know are pretty good and pretty fit for purpose. But you know, are the other ones okay? Are they the ones that you should be looking at? Do they still meet your standards? Especially now with the new customers and the new way of working, and the fact that some of the customers are going to be going back to work and some of them aren't. Some of them are still in lockdown. Some of them are not open. Do their standards still fit with yours? So it's something that you should think about. So can they still meet your KPIs and your your targets? And don't forget, somebody said on the other day to me, we're credit managers. You know, don't assume anything. Right, and that's a good one. So think about that when you're looking at your stakeholders and the vendors that you're using. Do they still fit with the way that you operate? Has the way you've changed the way that you operate? Has that changed the way that you need to change? And has that changed the way they operate? So think about that. Be better at video calls. You know, come on. We've seen this over and over again, and we still see it. Just because we're working remotely doesn't mean that we can't figure this out, right? If you look at yourself in your camera, you can see yourself. You can see what you look like. You know, you can see, you know, those of you that are in the dark, Jason Braidwood. Yeah, you can see the ones that are the silhouette, Jodie Allcroft. You can see the ones that there you go. you can see so many, and it is interesting. You know, we should be getting better at this. Right now, bearing in mind, if you are interviewing a member of staff, a new member of staff, or you're going yourself for a job, yeah, you don't want to be one of these guys. Right? You don't want to be one of these. It's the equivalent of having an I'm with stupid t-shirt on going for a job interview. You know, you need to be a little bit more aware of what you look like. You know, looking down at the camera with the guy looks like he's sort of trying to figure out whether he's got nose hairs or not. These are the sorts of things that you should try and stop doing. Get into the middle of the screen. Eating on camera is never a good thing. All right, never a good thing. The top of your head. The one in the middle at the bottom there, that's somebody that's using a virtual background. And they haven't got a computer that can actually do it properly. And I've seen lots of people that have got those sorts of virtual backgrounds and you can't see them properly. So, you know, switch it off. If you haven't got good broadband, your virtual backgrounds are not going to work. So the three tips that we would use, and there is, again, there's a CICMQ video on this on the YouTube channel, which talks exactly about how to engage with people online. But the first thing is, have the light behind the camera, not behind you, right? That's the first thing. Sit in the middle of the frame, and if your screen is freezing, then turn your camera off and tell people why you're turning your camera off, because it will improve your broadband, and shut down a few of the open applications that you might have, because then that'll speed it all up. But there's lots of hints and tips. If you do the CICMQ one, you'll see what I mean. So we need to get better at that. That's for sure. Creating a credit-aware organization, number 11. A credit-aware organization is an organization where when they're never ever going to say, yeah, but debt is a finance problem. The number of times that I've spoken to clients and organizations and they say, yeah, but DSO is a finance measure. Or the other one I had recently, back end of last year, was overdue debt's not my job. Right, and that was a guy in finance said that. Overdue debt's not my job. Right, and you just think, well, come on, you know, this is an organization, you know, a large organization, and you don't care about that stuff. You know, you've got to think about how you're going to make your organization credit aware. The real good organizations that we work with, and the ones that are really high performing, do have credit aware organizations. And there's two ways in which you can do that. There's the institutional and structural way, where you have debt targets that go through the whole organization, from the CEO right the way down the organization. And that's what I call an institutional, a structural change, something that everybody has to live and breathe. Bonuses are based on that. Targets are based on that. Objectives are based on that. And there are some organizations that do that. Like, for example, Shell International, they have that. And some other organizations do as well. The other way of doing it is operational targets. So these are the things that our friends at Wakeman's and Tarmac do. These are the league tables, the targets that you do and that you create. That's an operational way of doing it. It's not the best way of doing it, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. The best way is to get the whole organization targeted. So having cash targets or debt targets through the whole organization. So every salesperson has got an element of their bonuses based on collection of cash and reduction of debt. I did some work for one telco a few years back, and we actually ended up. I had a very tough finance director, so he was very supportive, and he said that right, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a clawback of commission on everything that's overdue at the end of the year by 180 days or more. We're going to take that back from your commission. Now it was my idea. He implemented it. I did get crossed off a few Christmas card lists, and I did get threatened by a few salespeople, but it did change behaviour. And once we got to 180 days, we then reduced it to 90 days following year, etc., etc. So it does work. But you know, creating a credit-aware organisation, how do you do that? You attribute targets, like Associated British Agriculture do. They attribute targets. So if they know, they look at the day sales outstanding, and they know how much is in dispute, how much is as a result of sales guys agreeing payment terms that are not really standard. They know all of these things. So by breaking down the DSO, if you know what your DSO day is, you can figure out how much each part of the business is responsible for that. So think about that. If you want to know more about that, drop me a line. I can send you a copy of the DSO drivers checklist that Associated British Agriculture does. So think about a credit-aware organisation for 2021. Managing remotely. Now this is a list that was produced for one of our bite-sized sessions by the amazing and brilliant Pam Thomas, a trainer extraordinaire. Now she puts this together for our bite-sized sessions. Now, when you think about managing remotely, we were probably managing remotely. Let me think, probably about 5% of us were managing remotely pre-February, back in the good old days of February 2020. But you were only probably managing remotely if you had an offshore organization, or you were managing another department in another location. So it was very few and far between. The culture is now remote working, and we've seen that the preference for people is to remotely work now as well, or to mix it up. How do you create a culture when you're managing remotely? And that is much more challenging. How do you recruit, interview, have your disciplinary meetings, assess people, do their appraisals, do debt reviews. All of these things are managing remotely. And if you're managing them remotely, as I said, one of the key things you've got to do is sort out your video, get your video right. You've got to project the right image when you're talking to stakeholders and customers, etc. It's not about just sort of keeping, sort of turning up in your suit. You've got to project the right image now online. So managing remotely is getting more and more important. Again, I think there's some stuff online. There's a managing remotely bite-sized session that we produced for the CICMQ organizations. If you want to know more about that, just let us know. As always, the number is email address is cicmq@cicm.com. So instead of sort of checking people out, it's daily check-ins. It's focusing on the outcome rather than the activity. It's motivation and emotional support for people, and it's doing something different rather than just sort of banging away at the same old drum all the time. So that's something that you should think about. How are you going to manage remotely? How are you going to do that better for 2021, given that we are kind of where we are? Billing assurance. Now, I know that Waitmans have got billing assurance as a function. It sits next to their billing team, and it is extremely important. And billing assurance came about when I was working with Waitmans back in 2015, I think it was, Pete. When Pete was then the billing manager way back then. Yeah, I know, it's a long time ago. But it's one of the things that I've introduced, and billing assurance comes from, or revenue assurance comes from the telecoms and utilities sector. In order for them to, for utilities and telecoms organizations to operate, they have to have billing assurance. They have to measure their billing accuracy. And so this is one of those things that's a transferable best practice. Everybody in credit should know what this is. Unfortunately, when I did a survey on credit managers on a conference a while back, I asked how many credit managers, and we had those button things where you can press and it's like ask the audience, how many of you know what your billing accuracy numbers are? Only 5% out of 100 credit managers knew. I was absolutely flabbergasted. Right? Billing is the window into how bad your organization is. Bear that in mind. Every wrong thing will end up on your bill. So you need to think about, what are we doing to improve that? In the professional services firms, it's the whip to bill timing. That's the inventory, if you like, of a professional service firm. It's how long does it take us from the point that we finish the work to the actual point of billing. So accuracy of billing and timeliness. Accuracy and timeliness are the two things that you should always track. Most problems are self-inflicted. 40% of problems that organizations have are as a result of a previous problem that they've had. So they've compounded it, right? So most problems are self-inflicted, and they all show on the bill. So this is something that organizations should be very, very clear about. Also, because when you fix a bill, it's across so many different departments. We very rarely do we actually think about, well, how much does it cost to fix it? Because you've got X has got to sign it off, it's got to go to here, it's got to go there, and there is a cost to every single one of those things. So there is a margin loss every time you screw something up. You've got to move through that and think about, what are we doing to improve that? And a good example of that, I did some work with one client, and they found that they did some analysis on cost of rework. How much does it cost to fix a bill? And they had 6,000 queries, right, that were out there that they were managing at any one time. And they worked it out. For half of those queries, it cost them £3,000 each query, right? And it was £3,000 each query because they had to send a truck out to get somebody to do something. They had to do site visits, etc. There was another organization that produced electricity substations I was working with a few years back. And there was when you're building something big electrical, you have to, there is a way, the site's getting ready, you deliver them at certain times, then they're plugged in as you're going along. You don't deliver them all at once because they end up sitting somewhere and not being delivered. But if you don't understand the process, so if you say, right, if the customer wants 5 of these electricity substations, 1 a month for 5 months, you don't want the guy in manufacturing to say, tell you what, it'd be so much easier if we just tooled up and did them just once and then stuck them in our warehouse. Warehouse guy then says, we haven't got space, we'll just deliver them to customer site, and then they sit on site. Yeah, so you have to think. You can't just have the processes that you're working towards. You've got to make sure that the organization thinks about it. So self-inflicted problems, and billing is certainly a place where that shows. So think about billing assurance. What is your billing accuracy for your organization? The quickest and easiest way to do it is number of bills, number of credit notes, and that at least gives you a sense of direction and direction of travel. Your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn profile, you need to smarten it up. Number 14. There was a session that we ran last year in November for a chap called Ian Preston did a thing on smartening up your LinkedIn profile. Watch that session. It's worth doing. It really is worth doing. And you know, we are all digital now, and looking at some people's profiles, you know, they're not brilliant. Look at your photograph on your profile as well. You don't want to be, you know, you don't want to be in the swimming pool on your LinkedIn profile picture. Trust me on that. It doesn't look good. Yeah. So have a more business-like one, a proper headshot done. And with iPhones and stuff like that now, you can do it very, very easily. It's not difficult anymore. So so smarten up your LinkedIn profile. Think about how you're going to get noticed. Again, it's all about content, right? So have content on your page. Think about what you've done. Put some stuff on there that people will find interesting. It's about content, and make sure you've got the keywords and things that you manage and that you do. So have a read and watch that thing with Ian Preston on. It's all about you. It's in November. The CICMQ session we ran there. A people policy. First time I ever saw a people policy was at Association for British Agriculture, and since then we've tried to sort of ping it out there to many organizations. High performing teams have strategies that manage, reward, recognize and develop their people. Right? And people is probably the most important thing that organizations have got, and well-being is certainly something that you need to focus on. And we've seen in here, you know, flexibility of working, all of those sorts of things. Now, the problem with, as I said, that we will have a reduced workforce. Yeah, we will be reducing our workforce in terms of the number of people in the UK that are of working age. And that is something that's happening across the whole of Europe. In some countries, it's significant. In Germany, for example, it's very significant. So think about your people policy. How are you going to manage, retain the competency frameworks that you're going to that you may want to put together, education programs to upskill people, retention of key people. What are you doing in all of these areas to retain staff? How are you going to manage those people? When you have a people policy, it's about, you know, how are you managing that? It's part of the T's and C's, yes, I know, and T's and C's of employment, but you know, set out some expectations about what you want from the teams that you're working with and how you operate and what your expectations are of them. Yeah, and it helps to build trust with your team as well, that this is how we operate. This is what we're going to do for your education. This is how we're going to develop you. This is what we will do for you as individuals. So it's something that you should think about. Something else that came up in, I think it was January, I got an email from Frank Anderson, again from Associated British Agriculture. I think he or one of his team went down with COVID. But what he'd done is he'd put something in place, and it was a manager contingency plan. And it's a really simple thing. So if something happens to the manager, does everybody in the department know what's going to happen? Right? It's like a sort of a mini disaster recovery plan. So what are the authority levels that the manager currently has, and who has what when the manager's not there? Yeah, what are the reporting lines? Who's going to do the debtor reports? Who's going to do the credit limit approvals? All the things that you've got that you do that you just take for granted as a manager. If you're not there, what happens? Right? This is part of resilience building within your team. Right? This is the sort of thing that you should be thinking about. Now, I've got the example from Frank. I do need to defrank it because it's got some of his numbers in there and things. But it's a really good example of something that's really simple and really easy to do. And it's only on a page, and it says that, and it's not got names, it's got job titles on. So it's not sort of saying, oh, that so-and-so will pick it up. It's got the supervisor will pick it up, or the such and such a team leader will pick it up. So it's something that will, that stays there. Right, so think about that. You know, it's a really simple thing to do, but it will certainly help in terms of the resilience of your team and the organization. It's definitely worth doing. Setting your own objectives. I was on a call recently with a whole bunch of senior managers. It was a call for the advisory council of the institute, and we were trying to set a date for the next meeting. And one of the managers actually sort of said, "Oh yeah, so I can't do that. I've got a whole day of doing assessments and objective setting with my team and appraisals." Right, and I thought, thank God I don't have to do that anymore. But it's one of those things that you just think, oh, really? You know, and it's one of those things that comes around every year, and nobody really enjoys it. Right? It's just one of those things that you kind of have to do. And in a lot of cases, it's because that's what we do, and that's what we always do every year. You do it. So doing something different might be a good idea now. Can you, as credit professionals, set your own objectives? Yeah, it's about that time of year now where organizations start to do that. Think about that. Think about taking the lead rather than having it done to you. Think about, can you set your own objectives? Now, if you've got a mission and vision statement for your business, if you attach your objectives and things into that mission or value statement for your organization, or the values of your organization, your boss and your boss's bosses can't really argue with it, yeah, because you're going to get instant buy-in. All right, so think about that. How can you do that? How can you link what you do into what your organization does, and then present them to your boss? Trust me on this, they'll probably thank you for it. It'll be one person that you won't have to do that for, so they might thank you for that. So think about your setting your own objectives, and ask your team to set their objectives too. Give them your objectives and say, right, I want you to set some objectives around your ledgers and stuff. Why wouldn't you do that? And instead of having your objectives set once a year, you know, look at it as every quarter, look at it every month. Now, the organizations that do really well have these reviews every month in their one-to-ones. So think about doing that rather than just having this awful sort of week where we're trawling through all these appraisals every year. You know, it's much, much better that you do it little and often. So think about how you can set your own objectives. Now, if you do that, your boss will thank you for it. And it will also be something that will build trust, that, you know, you do know what you're doing. Yeah, and it demonstrates leadership, that's for sure. So think about how you can do that. So it's definitely worth doing. Whenever I mentor a couple of people, and one of the things I always say is, do this. Yeah, make sure you set your own objectives with your boss. So it's really, really helpful if you can do that. And one of your objectives could be build resilience for the function in the future. What are we going to do to build resilience for the function? Number 18, training, development, and education. As I said, it now is more and more important. We've got more content out there than we did. The issue that we've got, of course, is we believe we have less time. We don't really have any more or less time than we did before. We used to have more time, probably because we used to commute. But there's time that we can do. And when was the last time you sat down to watch TV and realized there was actually nothing on, despite the fact that you've got hundreds of channels pretty much every night, actually, aside from the repair shop, which was on last night, which I do like. So there's an awful lot of stuff that we could do, and there's content that we could do, and there's things that we could push out to our team. Have you got, for example, with your team, objectives for their own so setting aside time for their own personal development? You know, I want you to spend an hour a week doing something that develops you as an individual, and then follow up, you know, a month later on the one-to-one. So what did you do this month? Why wouldn't you do that? An hour a week is not long. Yeah, and if you can sort of watch, you know, there's if you do an hour a week, right, and you just look at the CICMQ videos, you got 20 weeks worth of stuff to watch there. Right? There's no excuse really for not doing this kind of thing. And what does surprise me in a lot of cases is there's not a lot really. You know, I sometimes look at this, we've got 48 people or so on this particular call, and I think, why isn't there 148 people on the call? Yeah, because some of the stuff that people sort of do, we should be thinking about. You know, why do we not get more people on the call? And it's all, oh, I've got any time. But the good news is this stuff's all recorded now, so it's online. You can go back and watch it at any time. So that's something. So number 18, that's something. Training, development, set time aside, and also make sure for your team. And the final one, and this is probably also one of my personal favorites, work is not just about work, right? Work is also about fun. You have to have some fun. And this is the best thing that I've seen on LinkedIn in the last week. And thank you very much indeed, Natasha from Hayes, for posting this thing. And the caption says it all. This is Boris the Bulldog, for those of you who don't know. Boris is one of our is our mascot for CICMQ Zoom calls, and has been since very, very early on. And then what it says was, the exact moment I explained to Boris that the Hayes virtual wine tasting was for me, not him. Right, and I thought that was a brilliant thing to post online. It really was funny, and it really did make me smile. So that's something that we should always think about. It's not just about work; it is about fun as well. Virtual wine tastings. My son, he does some interesting stuff with his organisation, pizza nights and stuff that they have delivered, all sorts of different things, just to sort of break up the day. When we run workshops and stuff like that, we do treasure hunts and things, just to break up the day. And Yvette and her team have been involved in that as well. So so there's all sorts of things that you can do. So having fun is something that we should always consider. And Boris the Bulldog is a great example of that. So thanks very much indeed, Natasha. I think Natasha, are you on, Tash? Yes, you are. You're on. So it's great that it's really good, and we all appreciate Boris the Bulldog. Okay, so what I want to do now is I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment, and I'm going to put on the final poll, and then we'll do a Q&A after. So let's go down. Poll number 2. Okay, so poll number 2. What I'm after here is if the 19 are split into 2 groups, what I'd like you to do is to pick one thing from each of those groups, from each of these 2 sessions, 2 sections, and see which ones are the most important to you, or the ones that you're going to take away from this session to do. So I'm just going to launch the poll. There's 2 questions there, right? If you were to pick one thing from this first list, so this is the list from number 1 through to 10, activities of 2021, the most important thing, what would it be? And then the second question is, this is number 11 through 19. If you were to pick one thing from the second list, what would it be? So I'd be interested to know which ones you believe are the most important. So number 1 is stakeholder management, well-being, plan for resilience, simplify KPIs, league tables, nurture a high-performing team, learning and sharing, knowing your customer, etc., etc. Down through the list. Okay, 69% voted so far, 74% voted. Okay. Be like Boris, 19% so far. Great. Okay. Okay. Right, I think we're up to 92%, nearly there, 95%. Okay, let's 100%. Okay, end poll. Right, end poll. Okay, I'm going to share the results now. So we've got stakeholder management is 19, and we've got 24, 5. KPIs, simplify KPIs, 5 again. Okay, and then we've got league tables, just 2%. That's surprising. Thought there would have been more for that one. Nurture a high-performing team. That was number 1 at 26. And we're going down the list here. 10% learn and share. 7 know your customer. 0 for review your vendors. You'll be happy about that, Yvette. And then we've got be better on video calls. Only 2% for that. Okay. The top one on the second group was credit aware. That's a good one. 17 managing remotely, getting better at that. Billing assurance 2%. Smarten up 5%. People policy 7, 12. 12. We got the 18. We got 17%. Have some fun. Be like Boris. Okay. 7, 12. and 12. Okay, that's interesting. So the winners are being a credit-aware organization and nurturing a high-performing team. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. So let's close that down. Right, and go back to share screen. Okay. So finally, the final thing that I want to put on here. I put this slide up back in, I think it was probably April. I think we originally shared this particular slide, and we said it's not really been decided yet. This whole new normal thing, and I don't think it has. And judging by your answers on the first set of polls, I don't think it has either. But we're still working. If we've got 56% of organisations that haven't really arrived or still looking into what they're going to be doing in the future, then it kind of demonstrates that we haven't got to that new normal yet, which is interesting. So that's it for now. But then again, we don't really know, do we? What's going to happen next? So I just thought I would share that. That's the 19. That's the COVID-19 Credit Managers Playbook. We've got I don't know if we have any questions. Has anybody got any questions they want to ask, or is there anything that they think is missing from this list? That's always a good question to ask. Is there something that's missing from the list that you think we should be doing as credit professionals? Anybody? Nothing. So that covers everything, does it?
Nothing on technology, Chris, I thought, on either of the lists.
Technology. Who was that? Was that
Martin Kirby, Chris? Martin.
Hey, Martin. Yeah, I thought that would be you, Martin. Yeah. Well, there's a piece on resilience and automation. Yeah. Which is something that organisations should look at. But yes, I mean that's true. I think that talking to a couple of organisations at the moment, they have had some of these software businesses that have been vendors have seen, if you like, a 66% increase in inquiries for automated systems and stuff. So that's quite interesting. So there has definitely been a spike in people looking at automation going forward.
There was just one more for me, Chris, which was benchmarking, really trying to make sure that organizations in similar sectors or categories benchmark to see if similarities are there, not necessarily benchmarking for performance, although that's always useful, really trying to understand, you know, in your sector, is this a similar experience across the piece? So I think benchmarking would be the other thing for me.
Yeah, okay. There was a note somebody posted on I think it was the East of England site the other day, was talking about what things that managers don't do when they're looking at their KPIs, and one of them said benchmarking. But I'm not a big fan of benchmarking KPIs. I think that it's difficult to benchmark and get like for like on these things. As I said in an article a while back, you know, why would you use somebody else's tape measure to measure yourself? It's something that I'm not sure whether that's a good idea or not. Okay. Has anybody else got anything they want to add?
It's not a question, Chris. It's actually more an observation, if that's okay.
Yes, sure, Dee.
I think really over the last year, because people have had to cope with so much, sometimes I think you can lose yourself very quickly with what you're trying to do as an objective. So I think today, with you kind of detailing, it has really resonated quite a few points from me in there that you kind of do subconsciously, but you're not really aware sometimes you're doing because you're just managing and coping. So
yeah.
Today, if anything, it's kind of just reset the bar for me in the sense of, as you know, because we're going to be doing the CICMQ.
Yes, indeed.
It's been really thought-provoking, actually, even doing the questionnaire. So today, having you highlight these 19 points is, again, really making me think about what we're trying to do to achieve in the CICMQ, but what am I delivering internally into the business? So yeah, the things we are, but thank you for this, because it's just given me a chance to just really look at what we're doing. So thank you.
Okay, that's good. Well, as I say, the actual 19, the COVID-19 will be published on the CICM's articles page So if you and that'll be pinged round on LinkedIn, not too distant future. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now so we can carry on chatting afterwards. So thank you very much indeed for joining this 90th call, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you very much, everybody.